Hello, welcome to episode 8 of the Garden Revival BBQ, the podcast where we answer your big burning questions about gardening and don't make any hamburgers. We record the podcast live on our Discord server. Join our community on gardenrev.com/discord. In today's episode, we'll be taking a cheeky look at our finest bloomers because sometimes it's fun to look at things from a different perspective. I am your host, IG, the indecisive gardener who can't make up her mind on what to plant and where to plant it. Co-hosting with me is aspiring magician with a voice for radio, SpaceButler.
Watch me pull a plant out of my hat?
Oh, yes, please. On today's panel, we have professional gardener Zappy Snaps.
Hi.
And you probably know our guest panelist and her absolutely gorgeous garden from her blog, YouTube channel, and Instagram, the Impatient Gardener, Erin Schanen.
Hey, everybody.
Erin gardens in Hardiness Zone 6A5B. You know, we've had a little switcheroo with the zones last fall. She is in Wisconsin. She's also a garden columnist, a master gardener volunteer, and all of this on top of a full-time day job. I don't know how you do it, Erin.
I don't know how I do it either, except to say that I'm glad that I have a break in winter because it would be too much to do year round.
Oh, I feel you.
Yeah.
Welcome to our little show here and our lovely community. And thank you so much for making the time to be here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's fun.
Oh, it's a pleasure. One thing I really like about your YouTube videos is that I feel like there's something in them for everyone of any level. And I think that comes from you just sharing your experiences as you go through the process.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I love that that's how it comes across because I do want to reach out to everybody of all, whether you're just starting your gardening journey or you've been doing this for a long time. I feel like, the gardening community can all be one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've watched your videos for years and I've grown as a gardener. I've learned a lot and there's still so much I'm learning from you. And I feel like you're still having fun learning because you're always kind of upping the ante a little, trying to find something new for yourself to try.
Well, that's kind of the best part about gardening, I think, is that it's one of those sort of hobbies, things we do in life where you never know it all. And so it's like it's lifelong learning. You never say, okay, I've learned it all. There's nothing left to learn here. So those are very engaging and interesting activities to be a part of, I think.
Yeah. So my first question for you is the same question I asked all the new joins is, kill any plants lately?
Oh, yeah. You bet. And actually, it's raining this morning for the first time in about a month here.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm going to guess that there's a lot of things that have been dying a slow, painful death out there while we've been so dry here. Yeah, I've killed all kinds of things lately. I'm trying to think. I feel like a lot of them weren't necessarily my fault. I'd like to blame, like invasive jumping worms or some other thing. But I've done plenty of killing myself. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I assure you, there's always a plant being killed here.
Same. So when Brad was here last time, I asked him about his garden style, and I'm not going to ask you that because I think, like me, you really like to experiment with different styles. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's exactly right. It's the hardest question to answer because anywhere you walk in my garden, you'll feel like you maybe are in a different garden because I changed things up, and I just can't imagine having to pick one garden style and make that the whole garden. And everything changes over time too. Even the garden styles that I used to love, I'm no longer necessarily into that. Oh, things change. So I always am changing it up. And I think that keeps it very interesting too. Sometimes I think people might come here and think the garden looks a little disjointed because it's not all entirely cohesive. Although I do try to do things to make the garden feel like one. It's varied in style quite a bit.
It's garden rooms. They don't have to match.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Coordinate, but not match.
Yeah. Could you tell us about the different types of gardens you have?
So the general concept that I have here is that the closer you are to the house, the more high maintenance the garden is. So right outside right off our patio here is where I have a ton of dahlias planted, but almost every garden is planted with um, trees, shrubs, bulbs, perennials, annuals. Almost every garden has some of everything in it. So the things that I need to spend more time on, and often the showier things because of that, are closest to the house. Um, then as you get farther away, you'll get into more sort of naturalized areas that have a little bit of that sort of, new naturalism feel to them
Yeah.
somewhat. I've got, a shade garden that more and more and more I am appreciating shade gardens,
Oh, me
which,
too.
they're such a relief on your eye. They can be,
Yeah.
and I feel like they're more of a challenge, I think, to make look good than, a garden that's in full sun. So we've got some of that. I've got a vegetable garden, with raised beds in it. I've got a whole area that's basically just like a shrub and tree border between us and the neighbor that I planted, last year. So I do sort of compartmentalize some of those areas, but almost everything has a little bit of something of everything in it.
Yeah. How's your aesthetic changed since you started creating your gardens?
That's a really good question. I think that when I first started creating a garden, I was very attracted to kind of more orderly, formal gardens.
Uh-huh.
I know maybe formal is a bad word, but maybe because I don't think I've ever been formal, but maybe like a rift on that. And I kind of liked plants to sort of maintain their own space, just
Yeah.
a much more orderly look. And
Yeah.
I am so far from that now. I have one area which I call the circle garden. It's an oval, so the circle garden name makes no sense, but that is an area that has sort of quadrants in it and
Mhm.
a hedge made of chives. And that is as close as I probably get to a formal area. And I do like to keep that a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Um, but now I really like plants to intermingle with each other. I'm huge on ground covers. I would rather not ever, if I could ever avoid seeing ground or mulch, that'd be the goal for me because I just would
Yeah.
rather see a plant rather than mulch or ground somewhere. So, that's a huge change. I mean, I think when I originally set out and I had those ideas of, this kind of formal, very neat garden, I wasn't a gardener yet. So maybe I thought that's what gardens had to be. And then I learned pretty quickly, maybe that's what they have to be for some people, but it wasn't going to be a good fit for me.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've discovered a lot of Instagram has so much inspiration, so many gardeners that I just admire so much and I learn so much from.
I agree. Instagram is so good.
You never stop learning.
No, you don't. And you never stop being inspired. And
Yes.
you never know when one of those pictures you see on Instagram or in a magazine is going to be the thing. For me, I'll see those things and they just kind of live on the back burner of my brain. And like 6 months
Yeah.
later, I'll be thinking about
Yeah.
something like, oh, that could work here.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are those people that inspire you?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. First of all, I'll just say that probably my biggest go-to spot for inspiration is magazines. I love a good old-fashioned magazine. So I love Gardens Illustrated magazine and I love Fine Gardening
Mhm.
magazine. Those are probably the two I
Mhm.
read the most. So I love those. But on Instagram, I follow everybody from and get inspiration from everybody from, the most famous garden designers you'll find in the world, many of whom are European or British. So I like that aesthetic quite a bit. But also, you come across these little nuggets of people who have such amazing garden that are, I mean, these are not famous gardeners. These are home gardeners who have done
Yeah.
amazing things. And that's the nugget of Instagram because I can see those famous gardens and those famous garden
Mhm.
designers in other places, but it's those nuggets of people that you find. And also I am very inspired by people who grow vegetables very well. I like growing vegetables. I lose focus. So I kind of love following those people too. I don't know that I'll ever be as good as they are because I just had too much going on in my brain to properly manage a vegetable garden to what it could be. But I love following those people too. I get inspiration from people who grow things that I never could or would never even try growing. Those are fun too.
Yeah. What is something you're itching to try next year? Because I'm sure there is something.
Oh gosh. I have been on what is a bit of a fool's errand. But the past couple of years, I've really been on a kick for tropicals and plants that are not hardy for me,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous. I am now looking at all the plants that I'm going to try to overwinter because I've brought them into my garden in one way or another this year. And I'm really into it. I mean, even though I know it's going to be a nightmare potting up all these things and either putting them in my garage or trying to jam them in the corner of the basement, I don't see that changing at all because there are some really cool plants out there. I mean, just one example is this year I'm growing Fiona Sunrise Jasmine, and I have it in my window
Mhm.
box and in another pot. I think it's only hardy to zone, I think 7, could even be 8. But I am going to try to pot those up and overwinter those in the unheated garage and see if that gives it enough protection to make it through. That's been so much fun. So while I don't necessarily have a specific plant that I could name for you that I'm going to get into, there will be something along those lines that I will find, in the depths of winter and decide that I must have it and then go on a hunt to figure out who I can buy it from.
Yeah, there are some Instagram accounts that just tempt me with the things they grow.
Yes. And the things that you want to grow and you can't technically grow, but you figure out a way to make them grow.
And some things are shockingly hardy, like being in zone 6 now, you could theoretically try a hardy fuchsia if you were so inclined.
And I am so inclined. I mean, I'm inclined to
Oh.
try all that stuff. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, with the zone change, nothing
Yeah.
changed magically. So
Right,
I'm always,
right.
that's why I always kind of do that 5B/6A because it's going to be a
Yeah.
couple of years. But I will say that I've had a rosy teacups dogwood growing in my yard since 2019 now. And it's in a protected spot. When I bought it, it was listed as a zone 5 plant, but I have never seen it listed anywhere else as anything other than a zone 6. So,
Yeah.
I'm knocking on all wood I possibly can find right now because I'm so afraid that we might get a terrible winter that could wipe it out. But I have certainly been seeing that change in my garden over the last few years. So
Yeah.
I would say my comfort level with getting into actually spending a little bit of money on zone 6 plants right now, I would not spend a lot of money on a zone 6 plant, fully expecting it to make it. But
Yeah.
in the next couple of years, we see how things go, I will absolutely start dipping my toe into pushing that a little bit more.
What's the most trouble you've gone to acquire a plant you really wanted?
Oh my gosh. Um, well, I I have ordered plants from, these are all accessible, places people can buy from. It's just a little weird to sometimes like buy a tree from Oregon and have it field dug and then shipped in a box to you. But I have done that. I have also a couple of years ago, I decided this is kind of a weird story, but I often grow this plant that's Plectranthus silver shield.
Yeah.
Really easy to grow, beautiful silver foliage on it, right? Great foliage accent for containers or
Yeah.
the ground or whatever. And you can grow it from seed. The one year I decided I wasn't going to grow plants, I was just going to grow it from seed. I could also probably overwinter it as cuttings too, but I didn't. Anyway, I found myself in spring going, I need that plant. I don't have it. I couldn't find it anywhere locally for some reason. I ended up calling a store in Kansas that did not ship plants and basically getting on the phone with the manager and begging them to just throw
Oh,
some in a
wow.
box. And they did it,
Wow.
actually. It's quite nice.
That's
But
amazing.
we don't ship plants. I'm like, I will not hold you accountable for what they are like when they get here. This is so dumb because honestly, this is not, now it's everywhere. I've never had a hard time finding it any other year except for that one year. But that got stuck in my head that I needed that plant. And so I just got on the phone with somebody and basically begged.
I get it. I mean, yeah, you did the right thing, absolutely. And I think everybody here supports you.
I also have a large agave waiting for me in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. And they've been holding it for me. It's a friend who has it. He's like, you can have it, but you have to drive here and get it. It's like an 8-hour drive. And so at some point I will be making a, 16-hour round trip drive to pick up an agave, which again will not overwinter here. And I will have to find a place to put it in winter.
That's some dedication.
I'd love to take you out to dinner if you're here, because that's where I am.
Oh yeah, right. There we go. Well, if I swing by for the agaves, I'll come by and say hi on a trip to make it worth a trip, not just to pick up an agave.
Water my grass if you come to our house, because I think we haven't had rain all summer and everything is just crispy.
It's been terrible here too. I'm so happy. I'm bummed that I'm missing a weekend day to work in the garden, but the fact that we're getting rain is delightful.
Maybe it'll trick the garden into thinking it's spring. That's what I tell myself.
Right.
Oh, and I remember that time you packed a suitcase full of plants too. That was
right.
Interesting.
I also did that. You're right. Good point. Yeah, when I was in Florida last year, I went to a garden center and I bought a bunch of plants, and I got a cheap duffel bag and I put all my clothes in the duffel bag and packed all the plants in my suitcase, and carried the suitcase on the plane I basically brought home bromeliads. There was a fern I brought home and a couple other things. And I jammed that thing full of plants.
When you're in Columbus, you might want to visit Groovy Plants Ranch. They have some weird plants there.
I want to. Yes, I must get there.
Could you tell us about the Master Gardener program that you're involved in and what you do for your volunteer work?
Oh, that's a gregreat question. Yeah, so I'm a Master Gardener through the University of Wisconsin. I've been one for, I think maybe 2008 is when I became a Master Gardener. So, of course, the main part of being, people don't really, people think Master Gardener, it's not really a title. It's more of a designation that means you get to volunteer. So our program has some really nice projects. And the one that I'm and I guess kind of moved around from project to project, but the one that I'm sort of most involved in now is a little garden we have in the middle of the downtown where I work, right at the bottom of the hill, kind of right where everyone takes pictures and stuff. And so what's fun about that is that it's basically a display garden. We do some programming in there as well. If people want to learn how to prune or something, we'll do it in that garden. And then we try to share, like when we're doing garden cleanups or something like that, we'll share some information from that. So, but what's fun is that it's very widely seen. So you get a lot of comments on it and you get questions. So you know what people are wondering about. But more than that, it's actually quite nice to have an opportunity to work with a group of people, like physically be in a garden with other people.
Yeah.
When you basically garden by yourself, it's lovely and it's a great break from the world. But sometimes it is nice to actually make garden kind of a social activity. So that's quite enjoyable.
Weird because, on the surface with social media, gardening is extremely social. But when you're in the garden, it's like you're just there with your thoughts. You can't tap on anything. You can't click on anything. And it's a very different experience than anything else in my life right now.
It is, I think, the only way to really have time like that when you think about it for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I also think that's maybe why gardeners are so chatty and they're on podcasts and on social media, because they're craving any sort of human interaction because they've been locked in their garden by themselves.
Part of this is also that my poor husband has to listen to me talk about plants. That I think that's why he suggested I should get on Discord so I can maybe release some of that energy onto other people. Right, SpaceButler?
Yeah, you need to talk about plants, and you probably need to talk about them with somebody that knows what you're talking about.
That's funny.
So, Erin, you said you answer questions that people ask you in your work as a master gardener, but then you also get a lot of questions submitted through Instagram and YouTube, I bet. What are some of the common questions that you get asked a lot?
So it's interesting because, like you said, do tend to I do tend to have a lot of people who are at different stages of gardening, of their gardening journey or their experience. So, I mean, first of all, I think anybody who knows that who talks to anybody about gardening, like how to prune a hydrangea is going to be like the number one
Yeah.
question almost anybody gets asked, I think. Somehow we've managed to make this whole process so confusing for people. So there's a lot of those basic questions. When do I prune this? How do I prune this? And it's a hydrangea or something else, whatever. But I also get, I mean, one of the things that people seem to like a lot is because I do grow a lot of plants that are a little bit out of the ordinary because I like to be a little different and, try out new
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
So I do get a lot of people who ask questions about, well, what's an interesting plant? Or what is a plant that this is what I have? What's something that everybody else doesn't have that I could think about putting in that spot? People like, when they get to a certain part of they have a little confidence, I think, as a gardener.
Mm-hmm.
The next step, I think, for a lot of people is what's new and different that I should
Yeah.
be growing. So there's a lot of questions about those kinds of things as well. And then once you get to like seasonal changes, that's when I tend to get a lot of questions about just the things that everybody is doing in the garden at that time. When do you plant your dahlias? When are you cleaning up your garden? Things like that.
Those are all great questions. My last question to you is very challenging. Are you ready?
Uh-oh. I'm ready. You're gonna ask me. Don't ask me what my favorite plant is.
Oh, I would never.
Okay,
I would
good.
never. No, my question is, what's up with all the gardeners drinking gin and tonics?
Are you telling me you don't enjoy a gin and tonic?
I don't. I don't know. More of a margarita gal.
I mean, I'm not anti-margarita by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know. I just feel like, to me, the perfect gardening day is like, let's say it's like a Saturday in summer where I've had basically all day to do all the little things I want to do in the garden, like not like necessarily a big project, but like a billion different little things in the garden, and you can see what you've done. And then this rarely happens. And at about like maybe 4:30, this is an ideal garden day I'm describing. I'd put all my tools away where they're supposed to be, clean up the yard so I don't have like a wheelbarrow sitting out everywhere. And then I go inside and I make an icy cold gin and tonic, and I sit outside right on the patio and I stare at my garden. And there is something to me that is so refreshing and rewarding about that experience. Oh my gosh, it's lovely. So I don't know. I don't know why ever. I think other people have discovered the joy of a refreshing gin and tonic at the end
Okay,
of a day.
I need to
in the
try
garden.
it. You do make it sound lovely.
Give it a shot. Garden all day. And then, I do try to have a pretty strict rule when I can in the summertime that garden time must, at 5 o'clock, you are fully done gardening. Everything is done for the day. You're fully done gardening so that you can properly sit back and enjoy that gin and tonic that you earned.
Wow. Sometimes I don't even start until late because it's just so hot.
I understand that. I am blessed here. We rarely get hot like it does in some, like we rarely get super hot here. So I do have the luxury of most summer days just gardening straight through the day.
How's the humidity in Wisconsin?
Fairly terrible sometimes, but but I am close enough to Lake Michigan that if it's hot enough, we always have a lake breeze that comes in. So the humidity doesn't feel so bad when there's a cooler breeze that comes with it. So it's quite tolerable. I mean, I'm very lucky in that regard.
Do you have a drink of choice?
Is that for Zappy?
Yeah.
Oh, Earl Grey.
Oh, I do love me an Earl Grey.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you, some of the same questions I asked
Sure.
Erin. Kill any plants lately?
I kill a whole bunch of English holly that was growing in a client's yard. For people who don't know, that is a very invasive species where I am. And I did enjoy killing it because it is very prickly and painful. um, Besides that, I I had a tomato plant that was not staked well enough and it fell over. So, you know, kind of squished the plants that were next
Uh,
to it, so those died.
oh.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you were putting down how many cubic yards of, was it compost or mulch?
Oh, 6 cubic yards of soil and compost mix. Yeah.
That was all in one day?
I am not done. No,
Oh,
no.
okay. So it's like, it took me a month to do that.
I've only been at it for probably about 4 hours, and I'm really bad at estimating how much is left in a pile, but there's plenty left.
I think it's time to move on to talking about nice bloomers.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about some of our favorite flowers, but in a different way. We have 6 categories that highlight different qualities of flowers that you may not have thought of flowers in these ways before. So our first category is the little black dress of flowers. So something that goes with everything.
Erin, would you like to go first?
Yes.
I will go first. And absolutely. So for me, I think that this is mostly about color, honestly. I think that chartreuse is a color that you can put with any other color in the garden and it always looks good.
Yeah.
And so my pick for this is Nicotiana, a lot of lime green, or there is a shorter version of that plant that is a hybrid, which is part of the perfume series. So it's perfume lime green. And then there's also Nicotiana Langsdorffii, which is kind of a different form of flower and a little bit taller, but also a very nice chartreuse. And to me, I use those plants like not just because it will work literally anywhere in the garden, but I use that as one of those plants that I will put throughout the garden and it becomes kind of a unifying structure because if it's chartreuse, it is kind of bright and standing out. But I can't think of a color or a texture that doesn't work with that plant.
Yeah, I love incorporating chartreuse. Either in foliage or flower color, it's just such a happy, bright pop, and it kind of adds another dimension to the greens.
Absolutely.
Zappy?
I picked snowdrops because I love them. And I think they belong everywhere that they can grow. They're just beautiful and elegant, and they're just these simple little white flowers, and they come up. They're one of the earlier flowers to come up here, so it's really nice when you go out and there's just this carpet of snowdrops. Um, and since they, go dormant during most of the growing season, you don't notice them if they're conflicting with anything else. And then I also picked lavender because I love lavender and I think it's lovely every time you walk by a lavender plant and you get that little
Yeah.
puff of scent. And I've seen them in all sorts of settings. I've seen them, in a more Mediterranean style garden where it's all hot and there's rocks everywhere and it's getting blasted by the sun. And I've also seen them incorporated into you know, a flower border or even under trees as long as they get enough light. So they can fit in. And there's enough varieties, if you're going beyond just English lavender to Spanish lavender, and there's the white ones and the purple ones, and they're just very nice, and I think they fit in very well.
Yeah, and there's variegated foliage ones too.
Yeah, I have seen some of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I have platinum blonde. It's
Ooh.
nice. All right. I picked a couple plants because I am an indecisive gardener. One of them is Verbena bonariensis, and that's a plant I've mentioned before. It's sort of a see-through plant that you can plant in the front of a border and still see things behind it, or you can plant it behind. And it does get quite tall. The ones I have get to about 5 feet tall. There are shorter cultivars. It has very sturdy stems and these sort of tiny inflorescence, well, a conglomeration of tiny flowers and this inflorescence at the top of the stems. And it's pretty rabbit resistant, which is a giant bonus for me. They're supposed to be hardy down to zone 7, but in my zone 6, they have overwintered and they do seed prolifically. As you can see here with the photos that SpaceButler is pasting in. This is all different gardens that this plant is in, and the first one is sort of a meadowy garden that Nigel Dunnett has designed at the University of Sheffield. The next one is sort of a more formal rose garden, and then we have Monty Don in his Arabic-inspired paradise garden, and it fits in all those. It seems just at home in all those, and I think that makes it a really versatile plant. Another plant I want to mention is Aster Monch, and it's a plant that I first heard of from a gardener in Ireland, which is quite a different climate than here in Ohio. It tends to be a lot cooler, a lot more, I think, more sort of evenly distributed rain throughout the seasons, and it does so well for him. This is John Lord, if you haven't seen his channel. He's hilarious and fabulous. And you can see in this photo, it's again with roses, so it fits sort of in a more classic formal garden. But also, if you scroll back up to the Nigel Dunnett garden, you can see they're interspersed in that sort of matrix planting that he's actually calling it a step planting in there. And it just works. It works in all kinds of gardens. And another plant I want to mention is sort of a group of plants, plants in the Lamiaceae family. I think they work really well in all these situations too, like salvia or nepeta or calamentha, and you see Roy Diblick using those, and then you see, English gardens using those next to roses, sort of the same kind of use for those.
The next category we're going to talk about are tactile blooms, so stuff you can touch. And we'll start out with Erin again.
First of all, those were excellent. Zappy and IG, those were amazing picks. I love them all. And I like all those plants too, although I don't grow that particular aster. Oh, perhaps we need to add that to the list. Okay, tactile bloom. My pick for this, and I will say that my choices here are quite seasonal right now, because these are what's on my mind right now. So amaranth, right now I have dreadlocks growing in my garden, and that plant is mind-blowing. It's like almost comical. And so it has these sort of fuchsia. It gets very tall. It's probably 6 feet tall. And it gets these, I have it out in the cut garden, in the vegetable garden. And it gets these blooms that hang down that look literally like very large fuchsia or magenta dreadlocks. And if anybody can avoid touching, I've never met a person yet who doesn't walk up those and wrap their hand around, because you are absolutely driven to touch these plants. They are so fun and so wild, and I grow them because they look great in bouquets. But actually, the ones that I have this year got so huge that I'm actually going to go out there right after this and cut them all, because they're way too big to put in any bouquet. I do not possibly, I mean, this is a bouquet that would be in like some sort of, I don't know, like a chateau or something, because you would need an enormous space for these. I'm going to cut them all and try to dry them and just kind of find stick them all just in one vase and let them hang off the edge of a table or something, because they're probably draping down 2 feet now at this point. So
that's so cool.
I'm waxing poetic about these, but they are fun and interesting, and they're not the kind of plants that you see everywhere else. And people are drawn. I actually had somebody in the garden on Friday, walked in the vegetable garden, missed everything else that's going on in there, went straight for those amaranthums. Like, what are these? So
That's fun.
Oh my gosh. It's kind of funny because I grow vegetable amaranth. So when I
oh yeah.
first saw amaranth, I was thinking of that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But then I remembered the flower form. And I was like, yeah,
Right.
that makes sense. For my tactile bloom, I picked petunias because their petals are so soft, and I know it's probably a little weird, but every time I see them, I gotta just very gently pet those petals because they're just so soft and fuzzy.
They are.
Yeah. And then the other one I picked are straw flowers because they're so weird to me
Crunchy.
and fun because like even on the plant they're a little crunchy, and then you can pick them off, and I've seen bowls of just straw flowers because like they stay crispy and they're colorful and they're fun to like touch and crinkle, so they're just fun.
Getting in touch with our, I don't know,
inner 3-year-old.
Yes. Just want to touch everything.
I'm an unmitigated plant toucher. I mean, I will touch any flower at any time. So
Me
couldn't
too.
agree more with that straw flower stick, because they're just delightfully crunchy.
Yes.
Gardeners just walk around with a hand stretched out to touch everything.
Right.
All right. So both of the plants I picked to talk about are balls, because I think balls are fun to touch, especially small balls. All right. So the first is dahlia called Small World. It is a pom-pom dahlia. It's, I would say, maybe like golf ball sized. And I especially like it planted next to dinner plate dahlias, where you really appreciate the size contrast, and they kind of look like little, I don't know, little planets orbiting the sun or something, some sort of celestial bodies. And they're tight balls, so it's just sort of like you appreciate the texture of it. And I think they're really pretty, and they're actually really prolific bloomers. I've actually managed to overwinter these outdoors a couple winters. And then I kind of freaked out one spring and dug them up to check on them, and then they died after I dug them up. So that was a mistake. And another plant is Echinops, globe thistle. And they're prickly little balls, prickly little blue balls. And the name comes from the Greek word for hedgehog, like echinacea also comes from that word. And, they're probably not the most pleasant sensation to touch, but you still want to do it. You still want to reach out and touch that little ball. So I think those are really fun. They're hardy down to zone 3, which is also very cool. And they get to 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. So I think they have a lot of garden worthiness, even though my mom would probably be like, you need to pull that thistle. I'm sure she would say that.
It's funny because I actually have those in my yard. And
Oh,
my
you
partner
do?
has been like, can you remove this? It's a thistle.
Oh,
Some people
wow.
don't appreciate.
They're a little prickly, I think, but they're not. I mean, I did make the mistake of planting them right next to the path, so that's on me.
Our next category are sturdy blooms. And we'll start with Erin again.
This was a hard category actually for me.
Yeah.
And I had to think about this one a little bit. First of all, just going to say, given that we're at the end of the season here now and half of the garden is flopping one direction or the other, I am very appreciative of sturdy blooms when we can find them. And what I kind of came up with was, I started thinking about, I'm like, alliums, to me, basically alliums in general, They are so good about standing upright and the place they're supposed to be. And of course, the allium world is huge. So there's too many to name, but I did pick a couple. And so for like fall planted bulb that's going to bloom in spring, Ambassador is now my favorite of the sort of large ball flowering alliums. So when people think of alliums, a lot of times that's what they think of with an allium is the big purple ball. And I've been growing Ambassador. It blooms a little bit later than some of the other ones, some of the other big balls do, but it is so good. It has a much denser center to it. So it looks very good. It also holds up. I mean, probably grows. This is a tall one. I'm going to say this is easily 3.5 feet in most places. The stems stay very good. In fact, most of mine are still out in the garden because I also think that.
Oh, wow.
I also think these alliums look very good when they're just in their sort of seed head, mode. So it's brown, but it's still beautiful texture. And then you can always just break them off. And I saved a few to use for, I don't know, Christmas decorations or something. But I always have somebody's like, can I have your alliums when you're done with them? They are a really good one. So Ambassador is I've only been growing it for about 2 years, but it's so much better than the other big globe types that I really love it. And then I also am a big fan of the alliums that are basically summer blooming alliums that we grow, that are perennial plants. They are like a bulb that you plant in fall for a spring bloom. And I grow many of those. And I think my favorite is still Millennium. And so that will get, I think most people know this one. I think Summer Beauty was kind of the first of those that became very popular. Millennium is more purple. Summer Beauty is quite kind of pale pinkish. And I find that it holds up better as a seed head form in the garden than some of those other ones do. I would say it gets probably, I don't know, 16 inches tall, max, probably 14 inches tall. It's a low growing thing, but that one holds up very well. And you'd never have to deal with flopping with those plants ever. It's just never an issue. And, while the flowers, it's not going to rebloom or anything like that, but the seed heads are very interesting in the garden and they look beautiful in winter. If you can keep those seed heads intact through winter, it's so gorgeous if you live in a place where it snows to have a little dusting of snow on top of those.
Yeah. Even winter balls are nice.
Absolutely.
Zappy?
So I picked coneflower, and it was kind of hard to pick for this category. And I kind of picked it because in my head I was like, okay, what's the longest lasting thing? And there's a lot of options, especially if you're willing, as we did with the alliums, to include the seed head form. So I think coneflowers are awesome, first off, because they're really tough plants and they can go through a lot. And I really love their flowers. And then their seed heads, again, they are very architectural. But also in the winter, they're a favorite forage for a lot of the birds out there. So not only do you have this, seed head sticking around, you also are attracting birds to your garden. And I think that's really neat. And then I also picked hydrangeas because around here, a lot of people leave the flower heads on the hydrangea after they've turned brown and leave it in the garden over winter as this like architectural element.
Yeah, I
Like
do
it doesn't
that.
have it doesn't have the color anymore, but it still looks cool. So yeah, those are my two.
Again, a ball shape.
Yes. The balls are very popular.
So I don't know if this is cheating or not, especially since I'm the one that made up the category, but all the plants I've picked here, which is 3 plants, are significant in their sturdiness, not so much for their flower, but because of the things surrounding the flowers, which are the bracts and the sepals. First one is Cornus. I like Cornus cusa and the different cultivars of it because it's more disease resistant. I know some people on the server are like, Cornus Florida all the way because it's a native, and they're both gorgeous. So it's the bracts around the very insignificant flowers that just stay on there and hold on and are showy for the longest time. Erin, how long was your rosy teacups in bloom, I guess, quote unquote?
That tree just outdid itself this year. I'm certain it has to do with all the rain we had in spring. I'm pretty sure we had flowers on that blooming, I would say 5 weeks.
Wow.
It was just out. It was, I mean, that was an unusual year and has never done like that in the past. But every time I'd be like, okay, enjoy it while you can. They're going to be gone. I'm like, nope, they're actually still they're still getting bigger. It was unbelievable. So what I learned is that that plant wants more water than I thought it wanted.
Mm-hmm.
See, I thought you said you were cheating because of the fruit that follows on Cornus cusa.
Oh, okay.
Those
And
are
then,
so
and then there's
showy.
beautiful red fruit. So it's bonus there.
Yeah.
And some of the cultivars have the gorgeous variegated foliage that I'm absolutely obsessed with. Another plant that also has beautiful bracts is euphorbia, and the one I have in my garden is Ascot rainbow, and whatever it reverted to, I guess, a straight species. But it has the most gorgeous foliage, and the bracts are actually the same variegation as the foliage, the sort of like this golden chartreusey with the green, and it's gorgeous, and they just stay on there all through spring and into summer. And for those of you guys that are maybe in hotter climates, there's also Euphorbia millii, which is crown of thorns. And you can either grow that as a house plant in our, cold zones, or could grow outside. And they have beautiful bracts that last a while as well. And they do come in variegation too, because, I have to mention variegation. I love it. And they're pretty resistant to predation, which is also a huge bonus of this plant, I think, because of the caustic sap in them. And the other plant I want to mention for its sepals that hang around forever are hellebores. So you have this beautiful looking flower for at least a month, I would say. And they bloom early when you really you're itching for the growing season to get started, and they're one of the first things to bloom, and it's so nice to have. And they come in different colors like white and pink and yellow and sort of chartreusey green and dark purple. And they can be dotted, spotted, pickety, or double blooms, or kind of a gradation of color. I think they're a really great plant. And again, it's not the flower itself, but it's the thing around the flower that looks like a flower that makes them stand out.
Love hellebores.
Okay, the next category we have are no need to deadhead bloomers. And Erin, we'll start with you again.
I really had to rack my brain on this one too, which is strange. And so once again, I've come up with something that I'm literally looking at out my window right now, which is Bidens. And I'm looking at, I have 4 White Delight Bidens planted they were 4-inch pots planted in spring. And right now, each of those plants is probably 2 feet wide by 16 or 18 inches high. Nice. And they are covered in white. They certainly started doing better later in the summer. But that is a plant you never, and I think this is true for all Bidens. I don't think this is necessarily one that, it's something that's been bred. I think this is generally true of most Bidens. They just kind of bury their dead. The flowers just keep coming. And even if, when they do die, the flowers are probably maybe an inch across. So I would say that, even when they do sort of die on the plant, they're insignificant if they are there. So you just miss them. You don't have to worry about that. So that is sort of what I'm looking at right now. I'm sure there are better. In fact, I know there are because I know what's coming up from you too. But that was the one that was at top of mind. And I'll tell you, I am really appreciating that in annuals right now because when I look around at like some of my containers, I know a lot of plants are being bred now so that you don't have to deadhead them, but I think a lot of that is a bit of a misnomer because I see a lot of stuff. I'm like, well, I don't not have to deadhead that, but it looks a hell of a lot better if you do.
Yeah.
So that is a true non-deadheader as far as I'm concerned.
Nice.
Zappy?
Zappy?
Yeah, I picked Solomon seal, which is a little bit of a different flower, I think. And I picked it because around here, they don't set fruit. And apparently they do set fruit. I just haven't ever seen it around here. So they bloom and then the little flowers drop off. And then you're left with this really cool, elegant foliage. And, you know, I'm not a big deadheader. So, I was like, well, you could just say hydrangeas or whatever. But I like the Solomon seal. They just drop their flowers and that's it. And you get to enjoy
Nice.
them the rest of the year.
Nice. The plant I'd like to mention is Salvia amistad. And I know there are other salvias that are sort of in the same boat with the calyx around the flower. Again, I'm talking about the thing next to the flower more than the flower itself. The flowers are beautiful. They're purple. But the calyx itself is almost black. And it's beautiful. Even when the flowers drop off, it still looks like it's blooming. And I haven't been deadheading mine. I think if I did, maybe I would get more flowers, but it still looks really good without deadheading. And I know there are other varieties like this. I think it's the Salvia gorontica parentage in there that produces that calyx. There's black and blue as another cultivar, and can't remember the other ones, but yeah, I want to try the other ones too. They're not super hardy. I think black and blue can go down to zone 7. And I have had it over winter, but it never came back strong in zone 6. Amistad is not going to overwinter in my zone 6. It's down to zone 8. But, you can take cuttings and bring it indoors, and it's totally worth it because it grows to like 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide or more in one season if you start with a plug plant.
Awesome.
So I think it's a great plant to have.
And I just want to add, probably the number one hummingbird attractor in my garden would be those salvias. So if you like hummingbirds, like that is the easiest way to get them to come in, I think.
Monster doesn't like hummingbirds.
Right. What's wrong with that person?
What do we got next, Space Butler?
So our next category is 2-for-1 special. So flowering plants that have twice the value in some other way. And we'll start with Erin again.
So for me, I feel like I leaned heavily into annuals here, which is going to make people think I overgrow annuals. But for me, this is the breadseed poppy, Papaver somniferum, also the opium poppy. No one likes to say that. So first of all, I'm just going to say, easy for me, extraordinarily easy plant to grow. This has a lot to do with, obviously specific to my climate, but I throw seeds out in, anywhere from January to March, and I get flowers. So they're amazing. So you get the beautiful flower of these breadseed poppies. And what's nice is that breadseed poppy, well, maybe it's nice for some people. I like it. They're, they make their way around quite a bit.
Yeah.
So they are cross-pollinated, and sometimes you don't know what flower is going to come up. And so, like, I've got some that I save every year, and people are saying, well, what kind is that? I'm like, well, I don't know. It has no relation. I've been growing these same seeds for so long. They have no relationship to anything that I originally planted here. And so you get singles and doubles and these half ones and these weird forms with little cut edges, depending on what other poppies have been around the previous year. But
so
I actually think that the better part of poppies is the seed head on a breadseed poppy, because we're just going to go back to balls for a second here. This beautiful, silvery blue ball that stands on its little stick. And I just clean the leaves are not pretty when they die off. So very easy to strip the leaves off the stems and then leave the stems standing. They are gorgeous in the garden. And I would grow poppies like this, even if they didn't flower. If all they did was got that seed head, I would grow them a million times over. Also, they're edible. I mean, they're called breadseed poppies. These are the poppies that you put on your bagel, or in your muffins. And they're quite expensive in the store. So you can also save the seeds and eat them as well.
And before they bloom, you also get those nice fuzzy balls.
Yes, excellent. Good point. There you go. Another kind of balls to be excited about.
Zappy?
All right, so I picked 2. I picked pineapple guava, which is a really cool plant, obviously, because I love it. But one of the things that's interesting is it's hardy here in Zone 8, and the flowers themselves, their petals are a little fleshy, a little succulent. It's a little weird, but they're edible and they taste kind of like candy. So you get this kind of cute little pink flower on this evergreen hedge here. It's not evergreen everywhere. Don't think that it is. And then you get to eat the petals too. And it just weirds people out when you just pluck a petal off of a flower and pop it in your mouth, and then you're like, "Hey, you want one?" But yeah, they're fun. I just think they're really fun. And then the other one that I picked is quince, and not flowering quince, but the actual quince that you eat the fruit from, because they have these large, for a fruit tree that you eat, not a flowering cherry or whatever. Those guys obviously have large flowers, but for one that's actually for the produce, their flowers are big, and they're this pale pinkish white, and they come out after the leaves have already come out. So they're this pale pinkish white on these dark green leaves, and in the twilight, they just seem to glow. So I like that. It's just gorgeous. And so you get that at the start of the growing season, and then in fall you get the quince fruit, which are these large, heavy, woody fruits that are kind of ish like an apple if you really stretch your imagination, but they smell so fragrant. They're so floral smelling, like the fruits are, right? And then you cook them down and you have your poached quince or whatever, and you feel like you're in the medieval ages in a grand hall eating something, because they're just so different from most of the fruits we eat nowadays.
Cool.
Yeah.
You are our resident weird fruit expert.
I like the weird ones.
All right. I picked begonia tuber hybrida, and that's tuberous begonia. And the reason I think it is a 2-for-1 special is because it has floral dimorphism, which means there are female and male flowers, and they look different. The female flowers are sort of a simpler shape, and the male are more kind of like male birds, very showy, which I think is very cool. I think they are beautiful together, and I think it makes the whole plant look more interesting. And I was reading some stuff about tuberous begonias. Apparently there are 13 groups that they're divided in, and it's very interesting. There's single frilled, crusted, daffodil flowered, camellia flowered, ruffled camellia flowered, rosebud, carnation, picotee, and then marginata, which is similar to picotee but no blending, marbled, hanging basket pendula, and multiflora, which is low bushy compact plants, which a huge variety in this group of plants, which I think is very cool. They're not hardy, but they're only hardy down to zone 9. but you can save the tubers over winter and then you can plant them out again outside, or you could try your luck at actually growing them indoors over winter. They are, I think, a little picky about humidity and stuff like that, but I really like them because of that double flower situation.
All right, our last category here is strange but true, unusual flowers. And we'll start with Erin again.
I'm so happy that since this conversation took a rather odd turn towards ball-related plants, that I have picked the ultimate in ball-related plants for this. And that is, and by the way, not only do I like to use the botanical name of this plant because it is more appropriate, it's in subcircles because all of the common names for this plant can be a little rude. But I also absolutely love saying it because it's just one of those fun names to say, and it is Gomphocarpus physocarpus, also known as the family jewels plant or Harry Ball's plant. This is it's like a milkweed adjacent, I think. Is it I don't know. It's related to that, certainly. So, because I know that it also serves as not a host plant, but some caterpillars will feed on that. Monarchs, I think, feed on it. I think. I don't want to say that for sure because I'm not positive, but milkweed
That's what
adjacent.
Wikipedia says.
Okay, there we go. When Wikipedia knows everything. Well, there you go. Anyway, so I'm assuming okay, good. Thank you for putting the photo up so I don't have to describe in detail what these look like if you don't know this. But okay, this is the sort of evil person in me. I love to plant this right next to the road where people walk by the garden just to see the shock value on people's face, because most people are drawn to it because it looks really cool from a distance. And then you get closer, like, oh, that looks like, oh my, what is that? It's also great in like floral arrangements and stuff. So this is kind of a shock value plant. But certainly this is and actually I should say, this isn't actually the flower. This is actually the seed head. So I'm kind of cheating on this a little bit. The flower is
That's
sort
fine.
of right, whatever. It's insignificant little like thing, whatever. This is all about seed heads. So so I am cheating. I actually think I'm cheating on all but one of my picks for this. So I'm going to start with that one. So the next one that I want to bring up is castor bean, which is, if you've ever seen I guess those are probably I don't actually know. They must be the seed heads. The spiky red balls that you will get on castor bean when it flowers. I'm not sure. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure if those are the flowers or the seed heads. Do you guys know?
Nope, I've never grown them. Although I want to grow them.
Yeah, they're great and they're beautiful. Now it's essentially a tropical plant. I grew up from seed. Mine are being very slow in the garden this year, but they're beautiful. Of course, they're also insanely poisonous. Every part of it is very, very bad. So I always add that as my asterisk for people who need to be concerned about that. I probably wouldn't like grow them in a garden if I had like little kids running around.
I have bunnies running around, so I absolutely need to grow them.
Yeah, unfortunately, sadly, the bunnies are stupid, but they're not that stupid. So they never poison themselves with ricin. Although someone did tell me that they had deer come and eat their castor bean, and I thought, well, I can't help it.
I've had bunnies eat digitalis.
Yeah, right. And probably yeah. See, so I do think those must be, because if you look at the picture, if you can see the pictures that SpaceButler just put up. I think the flowers are on the bottom there, and the seed heads are the red balls, which is actually the part I was thinking about as the kind of strange and odd looking.
Yeah.
But very pretty. And then my last one is skunk cabbage, Symplocarpus fetidus. By the way, I love any plant name that has fetidus in it, which also stinking hellebore has in it, because it's just so, I think it's fun and appropriate. It tells you everything you need to know about that plant. So this is the eastern skunk cabbage, which is a native for us here. And this is actually the very first thing that will show up in my yard. It grows in kind of boggy areas. So it's just a native that has popped up there. I haven't planted it myself. But when it comes up, first of all, it's got this very cool property that it will actually, there is a term for the horticultural term for this, which I can't remember off the top of my head, where it creates its own heat. So it will actually create its own heat to melt the snow, and it will come up through the snow, often in February here in
That's
my part of
amazing.
Wisconsin. And so it melts an area, and then it comes up with this sort of purple horn-like thing that is the flower. And actually, that's probably the calyx, and the flower is inside of it. This is pollinated mostly by beetles and sometimes ants, I think. So it grows right at the ground level so that the creepy crawlies can get in there, because there are no flying pollinators that are out at that time of year. Now, it's named skunk cabbage because it doesn't smell like skunk if you're just standing by it. But if you step on it, it absolutely will. And of course, that's what's drawing in those pollinators, is that scent. After the flower comes really quite beautiful foliage. It actually looks like a very shiny leafed hosta. And then basically by midsummer, those leaves have sort of crisped up and just kind of gone away. But this is basically every year the very first flower that will appear in my yard, and it's such a weird looking thing.
Nice. That's very cool.
So I had a hard time picking.
Yeah.
But one of the ones that first surprised me is when I first planted fava beans as a cover crop. I hadn't actually looked up what they looked like as a mature plant, so it came as a surprise because they have these pretty flowers. They're this tall stalk, right? Like 3 feet tall, and all along the stalk there's these little white flowers, and it's in the legume family, so it's a standard legume shape, and they're just, white and pale pink, and it's just really surprisingly beautiful. And like I see pictures online of fava bean flowers, and I wish I had taken pictures the last time they were up, because they don't look very impressive. But like it's this whole stalk of these white flowers with these black blobs on the 2 lower petals. And it's really showy. Like people will stop and be like, "Whoa, what is that?" And it's like, well, they're fava beans. They're just a cover crop, but they look cool. And then I also picked voodoo lilies for strange but true, because they're cool looking. They're, kind of shaped. It's been a while, but they're kind of shaped like a calla lily almost, but they're dark, like they're black, and then they stink. They smell so bad, and the reason why they smell so bad is because they're pollinated by carrion flies, so they smell like something has died. And it's just wild to me because I have seen multiple people plant these like right next to their front porch or right next to the sidewalk, and I'm like, why are you doing that? Because they smell so bad. You can smell them from 20 feet away.
I
So
think it's just a novelty value. People
they
just
yeah.
or shock value, like Erin said. She just likes to see people be shocked.
Yeah, they are very novel, very strange. So they're just weird. And then, I think a lot of people might actually know this, but snapdragon seed heads, if you actually let them dry out and then turn them upside down, it looks like a bunch of skulls. And I just think that's really interesting that it just happened to have that shape.
It would be nice in a Halloween arrangement.
Oh, have I never seen that before?
I haven't either. I told Zappy.
Well, people deadhead them, right? So you never get to this point unless you don't deadhead, and then it's like, oh wow, what is that?
That is so cool.
Right?
I am shocked that I have not noticed this. I love that. That is cool. Great factoid there.
Yeah, for some reason I haven't noticed either, but I will be paying more attention now. I mean, I've seen people mention it, but I don't know. I wasn't paying attention, apparently.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, they are pretty small, but yeah, once you get close and look, you're like, what?
I picked 2 plants, one of them being the skeleton flower, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Diphilia grayi, and it is a relative of the Podophylla mayapple and barberries, and it has those kind of big leaves that Podophyllum has. But the cool thing about it is when it rains, the flowers turn clear, kind of glass-like. And this plant has been I looked around and it doesn't seem like it's easy to find for sale. Not sure why. It seems like a very cool plant and it's hardy down to zone 4. It requires a moist, shady location, which I don't exactly have, so maybe that's not the plant for me. But one plant that I planted this year, and I know Erin planted last year and it made it through the winter, and that's the part of this that is strange, is it's a begonia that is hardy. It's Begonia grandis, and it has sort of, the foliage is kind of like Louboutin shoes. It has red undersides, and the flowers are very delicate, sort of pendulous. They can be either pink or white, and the stems are actually pink. So it's not the most maybe showy flower. It is pretty, but the hardiness for a begonia, that's crazy to me and really, really awesome. And that's my spiel.
All right. We're going to answer a couple of questions that people have submitted. First question is from Francler. It's what flowers will bloom in part to full shade? I guess what's your recommendation for that kind of environment for good flowers?
So one of my favorites for deep shade is bleeding hearts. And I'm forgetting the name of the the domestic. I differentiate because we have a native species and then we have, the domesticated varieties. And I just think they're really neat. First of all, the cultivars, they're really big, they're really showy, they're very dramatic, and they love deep shade. So that's one of my favorites. I also really like hellebores. Do pretty good in shade here, at least. And then my favorites, snowdrops are fun because I know. Their favorite sort of setting is underneath deciduous trees. So they bloom before the trees leaf out. So it's not really deep shade because they go dormant as soon as the trees really leaf out. But it's kind of cheating a little. Those are some of my favorites.
It's a nice relationship that the plants have, kind of like taking turns. I like that.
I think it's cool.
I was just thinking of yellow wax bells. This is a plant that someone brought to my attention just a couple of weeks ago, which I know of, and I just kind of forgot about it. Technical name is Hirangishoma palmata, I think. And it will happily grow in basically full shade. The flowers are small little yellow flowers that kind of hang down. It really it's a plant that probably most people know of for its foliage, which is kind of a larger, sort of a larger leaf, and it kind of forms a nice clump.
Ooh, pretty.
But that's one that when I think of shade blooming things, in fact, when I was reminded of that again, I went and got some because I'm like, oh my gosh, how have I been forgetting about this plant? So I'm just going to add some to the garden here in the next week or so. So that's one of the things that I came up with. What was the other? I just had another one in my head too. I don't know. You go at IG if you have one because now I've forgotten the other one that I was thinking of.
This is a plant that I discovered last year. It's Impatience balfouri. And you got to be careful with this one. I know it's restricted in Wisconsin, so Erin is not allowed to grow it. It is an annual, but it self-seeds prolifically. I got one last year, just one plant, because I wanted to try it out. And it's a native impatiens, so it's not what you think of an impatiens that we're familiar with. The flowers are very delicate, sort of pink and white, and it's very airy, and I really, really liked it. And I was going to buy seeds to sow in the winter, and I kind of never got around to it, which was a good thing because I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens of them in my garden right now. They just self-seeded, and as long as I can keep them under control, I'm very, very happy to have them. Some other plants that I'm trying out, and I just planted them last fall from very small plug plants. So I'm not sure, the jury's still out, but they're asters that are supposedly happy in a woodland setting. There's Symphytrichum ciliolatum, Lindley's aster, Symphytrichum portifolium Avondale, which is a blue woods aster, and Eurybia twilight, which is big leaf aster. And another one that I want to try from seed is Aster divaricatus, which is white woodland aster. So it would be nice to have asters in the shade. I think that would be really cool.
That would be interesting.
And of course, there's Tricertus and Pulmonaria and Brunnera.
That's the one I was trying to think of, was Tricertus. Well, toad lily. And actually, it's funny.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Just before this podcast, I was walking around in the garden, and I'm like, oh, the toad lilies are blooming. And so I have Tricertus herda, and they look like orchids. So and it's blooming, and it's definitely like woodland edge kind of plants. That's exactly where I have it growing here. It's very happy, and it creates these big arching stems of the one I have is like kind of purple, speckled purple flowers, and it looks like an orchid is growing in your yard. It's just started blooming here now, so it's a late summer flower, and it's gorgeous.
Another one that I really like is Cordialis, and specifically there's this blue flowered cultivar, purple leaf, and they're just so cool. 'Cause there's not a lot of blue flowers that are like actually blue, and their foliage is cool too. It's like these ferny kind of foliage, and they really do well in the shade.
Yeah, I know there's a cultivar called Blue Heron.
I've killed that one twice.
Really? I really want it, but if you killed yours, I'll kill mine for sure.
Oh, no, you never know that for sure. You should try it anyways. But yes, I've done that. I've done a number on that one twice, unfortunately.
Do you know what happened?
No, I have no idea. It just wasn't there the next time I looked.
Oh, okay. Beautiful plant. Really want to try it. All right. Next question?
Yeah. Next question is from Anna. If you were starting your garden over from scratch, what's something that you would do differently?
So I can answer this one because when I moved in, this property is about a quarter acre. And when I moved in, everything had been weed whacked to 1/2 inch tall. And I did not stop to consider, why would someone who's selling a house weed whack everything to 1/2 inch tall? Well, it turns out they did that because 3/4 of the property was, fully inhabited by a combination of Himalayan blackberry and the invasive perennial species of morning glory, also called bindweed. But I didn't realize that because everything was 1/2 inch tall. So if I had to start over again, I would have gotten goats much earlier. So I am in a city, but I
Goats?
have goats. Because here's the thing. In this city, I am allowed to have 2 dwarf goats. And I grew up with goats, and I love goats. They're great animals if you are prepared for them to be goats. So don't go out and get a goat because I said they're great goats. No, do not do that. They are much smarter than almost any other domesticated species we have. You are not prepared for them. But I am, because I grew up with them. And the thing about goats is they love to eat invasive species. So what I have done at this point is I made a goat moat around my property because the 3 neighbors, back and either side, don't manage their own invasive species. So they come in from there. And the goats love to eat blackberries. They love to eat bindweed. They love to eat English ivy. They're not such a big fan of the giant knotweed, but they'll still eat it. So if I had to start over again, I got them in the 3rd year. I would have gotten them year 1, and I would have just fenced in the whole property and let them go to town. And then I would have started from a blank slate instead of being like, oh yeah, that's a good spot for a shrub, and then, having bindweed and blackberry just try and cover up everything. So yeah, that's how I would start if I had to start again.
The best selective herbicide is goats.
They are not very selective. It turns out here's the thing. Because goats are very good at getting out, and it took a little while to remember all the tricks of keeping them in. So every time they got out, they went for the most expensive plant in the yard at the time. I do not know how they sense that this plant is more expensive than the rest, but they do. So I had just gotten, this was year 2 of the pandemic, maybe? I had gotten this house plant that someone had been giving away for free because they didn't know what it was, and it turned out to be this huge tropical houseplant that at that time was really expensive. We know houseplant bubble, right? So I had a cutting of it outdoors because I'm in a climate where I can get away with that, and houseplants really love being outdoors during the summer.
Was it Pink Princess?
No, it was dragon tail something or other. But anyway, it was this cutting. The goats got out. They ate half of this plant. Half of this plant that I could have sold for like $100 for this cutting, right? So they are not selective unless you mean they like targeting expensive plants and roses.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
Sorry I said that.
No, it's pretty hilarious because like as a gardener landscaper, I do a lot of pruning, and they really love that because they get this sampler of all these different species of plants, and like I'll throw roses in there, and they will just chomp down on them. English ivy, chomp down, like whatever I've pruned. There are a few poisonous things that they shouldn't eat. I don't throw those in there, but they're usually smart enough not to eat too much of the poisonous things.
I'm not sure how universal this suggestion is.
Oh yeah, so that's not very universal. I'll give something more universal. So I'm starting a garden actually right now at a friend's place because they have more room and they don't have any invasive species that they have to battle. And it's super rocky soil, and I want to grow a vegetable garden. So what I am doing is, well, I cheated. I brought in a whole bunch of soil, and after, sheet mulching.
Well, if that's cheating, then we're all cheaters.
Okay, well, sure. I'm in comparison to the way I grew up doing it, because I grew up on an organic farm, right? So if we wanted a new bed, we would pick the area and we would sheet mulch it. We would put down leaves and we would put down grass clippings and cow manure and whatever else. Make it 2 feet thick in the fall, and then by spring you have an amazing bed to start with.
Wow.
But what I'm doing instead is I'm bringing in that soil, and then I'm planting a cover crop mix of winter hardy, here at least, oats and vetch. And what they're going to do is they're going to fix nitrogen, they're going to feed the mycorrhizal fungi and the bacteria. So it's creating this really healthy soil ecosystem. So next spring I can plant vegetables in there, and it's going to be awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
One thing I would have done differently is not planted as many narcissus. Oh my god, that foliage has killed everything in the bed where I planted them thickly. I can't grow anything there, so now I have to dig them all up, divide them, and I don't know what to do with the rest of them because I don't really want them in other places. The foliage just sticks around so long, like through July. Other things can't push through once the bulbs multiply, and just take over a bed. That's what I would have done differently. As far as making any other mistakes, I think mistakes in gardening are a really good way to learn, because you make mistakes in any new thing you do, but you don't always realize that they're a mistake. In gardening, the plants tell you, you did it wrong, I'm dead now. You get that feedback. The nature, the plants, they're your teachers. So it's sort of this communication you have with your garden. So I think all the mistakes I've made, all the plants I've killed, other than having this nuisance that I have to deal with that is just too much work with the bulbs, I think, all part of the process and no regrets. What about you, Erin?
Well, I am going to play off of that just a little bit and say that there aren't a lot of things. I mean, I feel like my garden is what it is today because of all those things I did, back when I was, starting this garden. For good or bad, they led to what it is today, which I'm quite happy with. But I think if there's a lesson that I wish I had learned sooner, it's to stop feeling guilty about letting go of plants that don't serve you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
One of the most freeing moments I had in my life was when I said, why am I growing daylilies? I hate them. Why are they here? Just because everybody else likes them, I don't have to grow them. And I read my garden of daylilies and I was like, well, that feels great. And so now I'm much quicker to rid myself of a plant that I'm like, actually I just replaced a bunch of hydrangeas because I was like, you know what? Those are fine plants, but you know what? I don't like them that well. I mean, I feel like there's a better plant that could be there. I feel like even though it's a healthy plant that's sitting there, it's just not something I like anymore. And that is a lesson that I think would have freed me up to get to the place where I am in my garden now if I had taken that lesson on and learned that lesson earlier, that it's okay to just get rid of a plant for no reason other than the fact that you don't like it.
And Erin, I have to thank you for giving me the permission to do that because I needed the kick in the pants. And you provided that.
Good.
And may I direct your attention to the wonderful no daylilies emoji we have on the server?
That's awesome. Love it.
Daylilies are a controversial topic.
Oh, yes. Perhaps the most controversial topic on the server.
The goats love to eat them.
Well, good. I'm glad I get to add to the controversy there. There was a lot of people who were just horrified that I did that. And of course, because I make, videos on YouTube and stuff, people know almost everything that's going on in this garden. And of course, people get horrified and people are real mad about some since I took off. But that's okay. You don't have to take them out in your garden. They're coming out in mine.
Yeah. Your garden is for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's one thing I really love about gardening is I don't care. It doesn't need to make anybody else happy. The only people whose opinion I care about are sort of the people that are going to spend time in my garden, like my family. It's so freeing to not care about what people think about something. I don't know. My little thing with the gardening.
What other space is there in your life, really, where you don't have to really worry about anybody else's opinions? I mean, there are almost none, frankly.
Yeah.
But in a garden, you get to do whatever the heck you want to do. And it really
wonderful.
doesn't matter, I mean, I think it's, like you said, it's the most freeing space because even in your house, you have to make concessions to certain things. But in a garden, oh, hell, just do it because you like to do it or want to do it.
Yes.
And I'm going to combine two questions here. Banana asks, what are your fall gardening tasks? And also Anna is asking, what spring blooming bulbs is everyone planting this fall? So I assume one of the fall garden tasks might be planting bulbs.
Yes, indeed.
So, I mean, I already talked about a little bit about it with the starting the new bed, but sowing cover crops is a big one. And I like to also collect lots of tree leaves to use as a mulch.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's, the garden cleanup, mulching beds that I'm not growing cover crops in, and planting a lot of bulbs. Some of my favorite bulbs, I think, aren't well known enough. because everyone likes tulips, but they don't tend to, stick around for many, many years, right? Like a
Mhm.
lot of people find that they just kind of fade away and they're sad and boring.
Wow.
But sorry, yeah, that was a bit harsh.
No. Hey, to each their own.
But there are species tulips. And I have found that in my yard, species tulips, not only do they come back year after year, they also multiply, but not like uncontrollably. Like they're not gonna they don't set seed, they just multiply by their bulbs.
Mhm.
And they are really, really beautiful. And they're really
They are,
early.
yeah.
Little Beauty and Little Princess are two cultivars of a species tulip, which is it's a concept, but whatever. And they're gorgeous. They're short. They almost look like crocuses. They're short enough that the deer, for some reason, seem to not completely eat them. Which is
That's interesting.
nice. So I really love species tulips. I love crocuses, obviously the snowdrops. I'm also going to be planting a native bulb. Well, actually, a couple native bulbs. Camas is native where I am. And if you're not familiar, it's this beautiful bluish purple flower, and in the areas where they were cultivated, they're still sticking around. And so there'll just be these fields with these waves of blue purple
Mhm.
flowers, and it looks like a body of water. Like it almost looks like a mirage, and they're gorgeous and they're cool, and I love them, and I'm going to plant some more of them. And then I'm also going to plant some of our native trilliums, Trillium ovatum, and they're cool and special. Everyone seems to really be a big fan of trilliums, so it's really fun to include in people's yards, especially because they're a bulb, so they don't know they're there at first, and then they're coming up in spring, they're like, "Oh my gosh!" And it's like, yeah. So those are some of the fall tasks. Oh, and harvesting kiwis. I have a lot of kiwis to harvest, and I'm gonna try drying them to see if kiwis make good dried fruit, because they're hardy kiwis, so they're not fuzzy, and they're about the size of grapes. So I haven't heard of anyone drying them, but I want to try it and see how it turns out.
I have to admit, I still have a ton of plants I haven't planted. I still have this fenced off little area to protect from bunnies, and I have to get all of them in the ground at some point. Yeah. So that's a huge task I have to do. The other one is sort of the other way around. I have to unplant some things, like things that are hardy that I have in pots that need to go in the ground. I need to bring in things that I need to overwinter indoors. I need to plant my bulbs, and the ones I ordered I ordered some tulips, and the two varieties I ordered are lily flowered tulips, and in my experience, they are more long-lived. They do kind of shrink. The flowers aren't as impressive as time goes by, but I still really like them. And although they are food for bunnies, I find that if I plant enough of them, some of them will stick around. And I hope I don't eat my words because it is a lot of work to plant them. But I think the benefit of tulips over daffodils is that the foliage gets really ugly really fast, which means it goes away really fast. Whereas narcissus foliage is just such
It
a
takes
persistent
forever.
thing. Yeah. The other things, I'm also planting some camassias. I'm planting Blue Heaven, which is a pale blue variety that kind of blooms at the tail end of when the lily flowered tulips bloom. And I'm hoping to get some a little bit of overlap there. And even though I've been knocking on narcissus this whole time, I am planting some. I'm planting bulbocodium, which are really tiny ones. They sort of have these bell-shaped flowers, And they have very sort of grass-like foliage, so it's not dominant, and they bloom early. I'm planting white petticoat, which is actually kind of a pale yellow. And I'm planting allium summer drummer, which is a late blooming summer allium instead of most that bloom in the spring. This one is supposed to bloom later, so I'm excited to get that. And I'm getting some galanthus finally, some snowdrops.
Yeah.
Yeah. Erin?
So last year I planted a bulb mound. So I did
Oh, yes.
essentially it's a bulb
yes.
lawn, but I did it on top of our septic mound and I planted like only half, not even half it, maybe like a third of it. And it was such a huge success and I loved it so much that I am gonna work on, I don't know if I'll be able to finish it all this year. I think I have another probably 3,000 bulbs coming.
Oh, wow.
And it's a mix of it's all basically small bulbs. And it's all sort of early blooming stuff because the idea is that you have to leave the bulb foliage standing and I don't really want it there forever. So it's a mix of everything, but it's snowdrops. Actually I should add, it's a mix of everything that is deer and rabbit resistant. So I do have species tulips in there because they will avoid those. But it's snowdrops, fritillarias, tete daffodils, Gloria of the Snow, Muscari, whatever. It's a mix of everything. And I mix it all up in a big bucket and then I drill a whole bunch of holes and I put about 3 bulbs in a hole and call it good. So that's the big bulb planting job for this year, is kind of continuing that, because that was such a huge success and I loved it so much that I definitely want to
It was very
keep planting on
beautiful.
that. Thank you. Yeah, I loved it. And then in terms of other fall jobs, I'm also doing a lot of planting. It's a very, very, very good time to plant. I mean, fall is a very good time to plant in general, in particular here because our springs are quite cold. So it's just I think plants establish very well. So I'm doing my best to get areas planted, filling in areas. Probably the best thing I do in fall is make notes of what I need to do in spring, because I'll tell you, I think I'm going to remember it and I never do. So I have been taking a lot of notes about like this area needs find a plant to stick here, or like I'm going to divide a bunch of Japanese forest grass in spring. And so I got to like identify those spots where that's going to go and just make some notes about that, or else I'll totally forget.
Are you fighting any sort of gardening burnout at this time of year, or are you still like excited to do all this?
I am past the burnout stage and now I'm excited right now. There was like a month there where I was like, oh God, but now I'm all fired up again.
Okay.
Oh, and which is good because I feel like, I feel the clock ticking big time over my shoulder on this. So it's good that I'm feeling fired up. Yeah, it's a big motivator.
All right. Our last question today is from Rootbound. What's an effective strategy for maintaining good soil quality outside of mulch and compost?
One of the things, I mean, I use a lot of mulch and a lot of compost, but one of the other things I like to do is use cover crops, which if you've been listening, you can tell. Like, I love overwintering cover crops in particular, like fava beans, vetch, oats. And I do really appreciate the legume cover crops because they do fix the nitrogen. But the other ones are also, feeding the soil ecosystem, which we're finding out is more and more important. We're finding out so much about it. It's a really interesting area that is exploding in knowledge in the past decade. It's really cool. Anyway, and they're protecting the soil from erosion. They're outcompeting weeds. They're maintaining soil organic matter. So they're doing all of those things. So that's one of the things that I do to maintain good soil quality, besides mulching and composting. There's also green or living mulches. So like if you have a bunch of raspberries, having a bunch of white clover growing underneath them. They're helping the raspberries because raspberries are a heavy feeder and the clover is fixing nitrogen. They're out competing weeds. They're nice to walk along. So that's another thing that I like to do, especially with perennial plants, because they're working year round. Their metabolism is going. They're supporting the soil ecosystem. That's all very cool. And then there's other common stuff like don't drive a tractor across your lawn a whole bunch because it's going to compact the soil and your soil is going to be very, very sad.
Yeah, that's probably good advice. Don't drive tractors over the place you're trying to plant in.
That is something I should have mentioned that I kind of regret. We hired somebody to till up our big new bed that we made a couple years ago, and they used a tractor, so they tilled and then they drove over the area they tilled, so it got compacted again.
Yeah. It's really interesting because, working as a gardener and landscaper, there's a lot of situations you see. And I have seen some really interesting soils. I think the worst, and I'm going to leave out so many details because but it's this site, and they were doing a lot of stuff, and they have this really heavy clay content soil, and it's a boggy area, and there was a lot of heavy equipment driving back and forth across it. So it's like so compacted, and the water can't go anywhere. So it's just not a good situation.
No. And a thing I'm learning is that soil is the thing you have to work on continuously.
Yes.
And that's not a lesson I've enjoyed, to be honest. Because amending, adding that organic matter it's work. It's hard work.
Yeah. And I'm always looking for easier ways to do that, which is part of the reason why I'm such a big fan of cover cropping and intercropping and living mulches and all that stuff, because it's improving the soil.
Yeah, you're the queen of that. There. I've never done that.
Give it a try. Grow some fava beans. They're pretty.
True. I'm not sure what can survive winter here.
What zone? I always forget. 6.
It's now 6B, but I'm having a hard time letting go of 6A. It still feels, I'm going to need a couple of years to get used to it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Erin, do you have anything to add?
I actually don't, because you guys actually covered every point I would have made about that. And I actually cannot think of anything to add to that, because you guys did such a good job covering the important bits.
You.
So,
and this concludes our episode. Thank you, Erin, Zappy, and SpaceButler, and thank you, audience, everyone who submitted your big burning questions, everybody who listened and participated in the chat. Thank you to our listeners on YouTube and streaming apps. And you can see our gardens on Instagram at Garden Rev. Join us on Discord to chat at gardenrev.com/Discord. And Erin, could you tell us where people can find you online?
Sure, you can find me on Instagram at Impatient Gardener, on YouTube at The Impatient Gardener, or at theimpatientgardener.com online.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Sorry we went so much overtime once again. I tried. We cut down our usual categories by half. We still went way over. Thank you for your patience. Erin, you are not the impatient gardener. You are the patient gardener.